Hi, Virginie.
Hello, Timo. How are you?
No, good afternoon. I'm fine, thank you.
Welcome to Your Public Value. We have known each other since Your Public Value really started and was incubated even before we were registered. And you are a member of our advisory council. Thank you very much for your support. I have asked all the participants of this summit what public value means to them. But of course, I think you have a scientific explanation. Can you tell us what public value is?
Public value refers to an organization's contribution to the common good.
The common good, you mean the role of corporations can play in society towards the environment?
Any organization has a social function, and how well it performs this social functions is, for example, articulated in what we call public value. Therefore, kind of public value atlas, something we issue in Switzerland, in Germany for a couple of years already, signals to the market, to politics, to the customer, to the citizens, to the citizenship, how well an organization performs this role. A church, a soccer club, an NGO, a corporation, automotive, chemicals, whatever. And this look of society, of the organizations, if you look at society as an society of organizations, then organizations become means, a vehicle to create, to transform people's life, even to the humanity's progress. We might not exaggerate to say organizations, whatever sector, are kind of pacemakers of humanity. And in refocusing this function, corporations, in particular the private sector, have also a chance to regain trust, legitimacy, what has been eroding not just since the financial crisis, but any large corporation suffers this kind of lack of trust, and public value is a kind of a positive note to regain its place in developing a country, in developing a region, a neighborhood, whatever. And if you shift from this more passive, we have to do some CSR as an additional piece of work, to a more centralized focus on the value creation part, which goes beyond profits, which includes profits. We should never simply oppose, say, profit and morals, morality and profits, but see it as in a larger picture as something contributing. Therefore, the notion of contribution is important to me, to something called the common good. We regain, to me, a better kind of functional view on organizations. In other words, public value is not necessarily a kind of a moral embarrassment. It's rather rediscovering what organizations do in an environment they are actually built on, or they have to rely on environment, and at the same time they interact. And public value discussion tries to kind of give it a name, introduces to business administration, related to the notion of value creation, also to the discussion of social purpose. Therefore, the whole public value discourse, to me, in the beginning of the 21st century, is a vehicle, even a means, to remind us of the deeper root of capitalist entrepreneurship activities for the sake of bigger than profits. In other words, organizations are a means which is bigger than satisfying their own needs. They can only satisfy their own needs by contributing to a larger entity. This is the public value discourse as I perceive it.
Yes, I really like your expression, the pacemakers of the humanity. So it's actually acknowledging that the role that absolutely all corporations have on us as citizens, on the environment, on our ecosystem, whether they understand it or not.
Right, correct, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that if they understand it fully and if they embrace this role, then they can add to profit public value creation, and that's a way to gain trust, and to remain sustainable in this changing environment?
Definitely. I mean, on a more instrumental level, one could also argue it helps to position itself as an attractive employer. It's about employer attractiveness. It's also about motivation for employees. In our studies, our data show that the more leaders, top management conveys this notion of common good public value to its whole organization, it has a positive effect on people's satisfaction with their work, where they strive for meaning. It's also a means to reduce risk towards the market, actually. It reduces volatility. It helps to also gain trust with investors, as we can show. And last but not least, it's also a source of innovation to look at the company strategy from the outside in perspective, to ask oneself what's necessary to human progress, and also develop new products which kind of balance this entire need spectrum from moral to profit to whatever need is necessary. And therefore, it's not just risk management, it's also a source of innovation.
But I remember when we started working on that, it was only 18 months ago, then it was widely acknowledged that it concerned only around 10%, if not less, 10% of the corporations. Mm-hmm. What's your appreciation working with corporations in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria? Is this trend growing and moving?
On the one hand, corporations acknowledge that out there, and our data show, 8 out of 10 people, both in Switzerland and Germany, are concerned that the public value, the common good, is not properly taken care of. If corporations want to play a role in terms of sustaining liberal, free market, whatever economy, they have to invest in this kind of idea, because otherwise regulator politics will vote them away in a way. And therefore they see this as a risk, large corporations. At the same time, I would argue in a startup scene, there's even a more and even a better and a broader understanding of how to build business models which are sustainable from the beginning, right from the start, to build in a kind of public value epitome or DNA-like purpose. If you only count the frequency how top managers use the word common good or public value, it increased significantly in the last 4 years. The public discourse, we hear more than we did in the past, the word, or just the word common good, how they understand it, how they use it. Of course, this might be very subjective. On the other hand, the very discourse on the more systemic level, not just on the level of individual corporations, but to look at the boundary conditions, the context, the ecosystems level, as you say, or the system of capitalism as a whole, obviously requires that organizations engage in this debate.
That's really, really interesting. So there are still expectations that are bigger than what the corporations can offer. It's a market. In a way, it's a market for corporations.
It's a market. I mean, on the one hand, we can say that it's, for whatever reason, when Larry Fink talked about social purpose, the BlackRock leader and CEO, it was a strong signal to many, many boardrooms. We can also say it's cheap talk, but I'm convinced it's not just cheap talk. There's a lot of things going on. Very serious experiments in whatever area. It's not just ecological problem solving, it's also social problem solving. Therefore, the landscape is more scattered than ever. I would say we see a lot of experiments, and therefore, when you say it's the expectation is bigger, I would even argue that we see a new generation of leaders who look for ideas to transcend even their own activities to a larger picture. And I would also admit, when I talk to executives, I feel for them, public value is also kind of a ego enhancement technique. And they see that it also helps themselves to see one person or themselves as somebody who contributes, and it's also kind of a narcissistic ego booster in a way, which is psychologically speaking not the worst thing.
Yeah, it's a driver.
It's a drive, definitely it is. It also helps the individual to make sense and to derive meaning from the workplace, which is sometimes hard to derive without a kind of idea, which if it's only profits and money, intelligent people are no longer satisfied with this kind of extrinsic motivation. They look for purpose. We have this purpose mania even. At Leipzig Business School, we develop a leadership model based on purpose, social purpose. It means contribute to common good. And I feel, be it in a lecture hall or be it in a seminar room, that not just young people, but primarily young people look for sources of meaning, and public value definitely is a driver for this kind of self-enhancement.
Timo, I know you have developed a public value scorecard, which is a unique tool to measure public value. So far, it's the only one. There are a lot of various measurements, but they are mainly either on environmental impact or there is a debate on social impact. You have developed the public value scorecard. Can you please tell us more about that?
Public value scorecard is a means to help an organization to understand its social function, its quality of performing in 5 dimensions, as you say. It includes, of course, profitability or sense of using resources effectively and efficiently, but it also includes a moral dimension. Is this behavior decent, morally okay in a way? Does it contribute to life quality? The third one, does it contribute to the social relations in terms of cohesion? And last but not least, what is also important and also counts 20% in this equation is, does it kind of solve, and this should be the primary task, actually solve actually a problem? Does this product serve the need in the car, taking people from A to B or whatever? It's this instrumental value or kind of use value. And what we see typically is how those 5 dimensions sometimes play out in a synergetic way, sometimes create contradictions. In any case, what the public value scorecard does, it helps executives to see a fuller picture, what it means to invest, what it means to develop a product, to what it means to do a certain, or to start a certain initiative. And in the end, I would argue the public value scorecard is a lens which in a holistic way views societal impacts, both from the positive and from the negative side.
Results are useful to executives, as you just mentioned, also to investors, I understand?
Definitely.
To citizens.
Actually, I would argue it's for every group or any constituency who wants to talk about social impacts with an organization. An organization engages in a dialogue which goes far beyond CSR, beyond stakeholder dialogue, which goes into the realm of the common good. And this, personally, I would argue, it's not necessarily new, because only Aristotle would have said so probably. But these days it's reintroducing the notion of common good in our corporate world, and people are sometimes surprised about the additional value of public value scorecard, because it helps them see things they wouldn't have seen without this scorecard measurement tool.
Right, and also it goes beyond the notion of consumer. Yes, we're talking about each of us walking in the street.
It calls for the citizen within you. In your role as a citizen, not just as a consumer, it calls for the citizenship, the idea of being part of a community, and asks people what it needs for them to flourish as an individual in community. Yes. In other words, it tries to rebalance this relationship between the individual and the group and the individual, and overcome, not suspending the notion of individualism, but at least to make us aware how much we depend on others in networks and ecosystems, and actually are the product of our environment. And this public value scorecard methodology shows the organization how much it depends in a network of relationships from others and within a certain ecosystem, if you might say so.
The CEOs and the board members are also citizens, and how they interact with their own private individual ecosystems.
Definitely, and it's if you take the CEO's perspective, it helps CEOs to see themselves in a larger picture without a hierarchy of needs or values, because in this scorecard, profitability is next to morality, is next to life quality. There's no supremacy or a hierarchy, a priority of profits. It looks how people perceive this hierarchy. And our data show that, at least in Germany in 2019, it's visible on our website, gemeinwohlatlas.de, that people or citizens value highest morality and only second economic success. In other words, providing services and goods in its core business is something, at least these days, people only value second in Germany. In other words, morality is highest. Whether or not CEOs like this, it's a fact. And if you say public value is what the public values, it might sometimes sound cruel, nasty, and unfair and unjust, whatever. But public value scorecard provides to give voice to people, the people, if you might say so, people on the street. And if people see things like as they do see things, that CEOs at least have to listen. Whether they act in this way is a different story. But at least public value scorecard is a listening instrument and for dialogue, and then CEOs have to make up their mind without necessarily following always the street, the main street, but at least Main Street has a voice. If they not have a share in terms of share and be a part of the property structure of the company, they at least have a voice. And public value scorecard gives voice to people.
Is the younger generation more interested in public value than older people?
Interesting. I'm grateful for this question because it's actually quite subtle. On the one hand, yes, in the startups, seeing the young people and they engage for purpose and look for meaning in their lives and set up a company to solve a problem. At the same time, what we see in the German population, the older you are, the more concerned you are with the public value in the country. And it's interesting that the older people are, maybe they are more life experienced and see different things in life. They are also more concerned. So I would not be able to provide data by saying it's only the young generation, but the younger generation is one who is prepared to act. And we see it in different initiatives, movements these days, that the younger generation gets more politicized again, if I might say so. In the corporate world, these young people develop ideas which might turn into unicorn-like startup entrepreneurial success. And at the same time, I would argue, if you see, for example, Fridays for Future movement, it's the young generation who takes up initiative these days. At the same time, the older generation is dominating our society because of demographic change. The young generation needs the older ones, and the older ones might not necessarily vote for these more progressive parties. They might look for other alternatives. Therefore, this dialogue between generations is more important than ever. And I see that we have rather a split between generations, and we have to take care that the split is not getting too large or too big between the young and the old.
Right. Your university in Leipzig is also an incubator for startups. And then, as I just mentioned, you have the Public Value Awards for startups. Can you tell us a little bit more about these two initiatives?
Yes, as a business school founded in 1898, we are one of the oldest, maybe the oldest in Germany. And it has been for a long time famous in creating startups. It's not just an incubator for the sake of incubating, but it's an incubator who was at least part of stories of 4 unicorns, where our alumni were part of creating not just jobs, but really successful entities in terms of corporations. And at the same time, this new movement of public value thinking very well connects and relates to this entrepreneurial spirit or hub. And we developed, as you say, this Public Value Startup Award together with Ernst & Young. It's the Ernst & Young Public Value Award for startups, where we joined with the consultancy to see how young firms, and they have the Public Value Scorecard as a methodology to evaluate, with a prestigious jury, with investors, with politicians, with artists, with a number of people from different areas of society. And we do it now for the fourth time. And what we see is that the applications get better, we get more applications, and obviously these days where we have a decreasing number of founding activities across the world, in our sector of the public value startup founding activities, we have a growing number. And this is promising because what they say is we do not look for a startup award simply adding another flavor to social impact, to CSR, but we look for something which connects to the common good idea. And we have applications from all over the place, from education, from medicine, to internet startups, to banking, to online psychotherapy, you name it. Almost any sector has some examples at this award to be celebrated. And this is promising because obviously young generation discovers, or these founders, these entrepreneur generation discovers it's obviously meaningful or sensible or even possible to relate public value with some business eye to earn money, to make money, maybe big money, at the same time to serve humanity. And this is the unique selling point of this award.
Yes, the award is happening in the fall every year, and we will include the link to the awards on your page. What do you see the future of public value is going to be?
I think the future of public value is going to be in different several directions. One is, I hope that it gets more mainstreamed in the research area, that it comes natural to see the social purpose, the common good contribution is part of society or of corporate performance. This is the research part. We might also see more empirical studies to prove and show how public value performance relates to other performance areas, not just financial, be it in HR, be it in marketing, whatever correlations are investigated. We might also see that public value thinking is something a new generation is kind of incorporating in terms of helping business also to regain a kind of identity of being a respectable salesman, as we say, to make the profession of managers more attractive again, because I would argue the profession of management is under heavy attack. And by doing so, by embracing the public value notion, corporations might also have a fair share, so to speak, or contribute to solve not just systems problems in terms of progress of humanity, as I said, pacemaking of humanity, but also helping to sustain the social order, because I feel if companies do not engage in this kind of thinking, we run the risk that the primary functions of what economy does in capitalist society is really at stake. It's at stake, and it's of course it's a challenge for politics, for politicians, but at the same time, business people cannot simply withdraw from this discussion by saying, let's do our business and get out of our way. We create profits, we create work, we create jobs, we pay taxes. This is no longer enough. And I would even argue public value thinking has also strong competitors. You might say sustainability is one competitor, or these days SDGs are competitors. But in the long run, I would say that the common good narrative is one of the strongest narratives we have in our cultural tradition, and we should play on this and not not to waste resources by saying it's additional piece, it's core business of corporation to say that common good can help us to make it visible what the social function of an organization is.
Yes, I mean, I would of course agree with you, but sustainability experts, ESG experts would also argue that they work for the common good. So it's one big family in a way.
Definitely. It's a big family. And if ESG, SDG, CSR, sustainability make this link to the common good, even better. But I don't see, at least in research, this link to the common good, except at least at these days in 2019, explicitly made in the public value discourse, but not made in the other discourses. But in a way, I would totally agree with you, Virginie, it's a kind of family.
It's a family. It's also for, as we say, the common good. So I personally don't see any alternative, you know, because we have these discourses that are very stressful about the damages done to the planet and to communities worldwide. So here the discourse on common good and the public value approach are one of the solutions.
Definitely, and if you say you don't see an alternative, I would totally agree. And I would even argue if we have a challenge in complexity. And if complexity is a challenge, public value is one, maybe even the answer to cope with complexity. Mm-hmm. As I said in the beginning, it's not just about embarrassment, about morally insane practices. It's a way to address a macro level, because on the micro level, call it disruption, digitalization, ecological change, we are no longer to address the problems in the proper way. Therefore, we have to shift the level of analysis, and common good is the level of analysis to address community and society. Therefore, the actual driver of public value discourse to me is increased complexity. If nobody takes care of the whole, only looks at the parts, the whole will fall apart. Therefore, responsible leaders look for the whole, and common good is kind of a language to address the whole.
Timo Meynhardt, thank you. I will keep these words as a conclusion, like public value is the perfect answer to address the complexity of our times and to really offer a solution to the whole problem. I want to thank you for being with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Virginie. Thank you.